And, for these small communities who have access to CBC broadcasts, okay, through terrestrial broadcasting, Nick, they don't have radio stations. And to the degree that they have radio stations, they don't really have a lot of local programming. So,
it's true.
So it's become a national broadcaster that broadcasts, it's everything from Toronto. So it's just not serving the purpose that it was intended to. And what it was intended to do is going to be available to people over a period of time in greater numbers all over the country, in the remotest of areas, through the internet. So, look, if you think that the government has a responsibility to provide access to information and communications, etc., to bring Canadians together, to tie them together through electronic means, if you will, through communications means, then it seems to me that if you're going to spend money, that if indeed that is a government responsibility, then the proper direction to be going would be to say, forget about the CBC, let's take some of that money and invest it in internet access in remote communities. Now, I'm not saying we need to do that.
Like
I'm just saying it makes more sense than continuing to throw money into CBC, which is frankly a dinosaur. So, but
it is, and like every dinosaur, it's got a huge appetite.
But going back again, I think that the bigger issue is whether or not we have good quality journalism in this country and indeed in Western society overall. And I think that all of the arguments, all of the complaints that we're making about the CBC to a greater or lesser degree could be leveled at other media outlets. And, we were talking about residential schools earlier on the show, Nick, again, with respect to canceling Canada Day. So, if you want to go back and listen to that, if you're listening to the podcast, again, that was yesterday's podcast. But where am I going with this? I guess what I would say is, again, take a look at that. It's a national story that they're using these detectors to determine whether or not there are potentially bodies in a grave site, and next thing we know, the journalists are reporting that there could be 600 bodies. I'm a little skeptical, and I think a good journalist would be a little skeptical as well. So, the fact is that it looks like there were some bodies discovered. I'm not sure that it looks like there were 600 bodies, but let's wait and see what the result of an excavation show us. Let's see what excavating these remains in Kamloops show us. But instead, one or two people, they blow the story up, and then this is the worst part. And then you get all of the other journalists, okay, not reporting the story, but reporting what other reporters have reported on the story. And so you get this sort of feedback.
It's just a loop, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
And if somebody got it wrong, then everybody ends up getting it wrong because nobody's doing anything original anymore.
Well, how many times recently at a major news event, whether it be in Washington, D.C., or in Paris, or in Toronto, do you see all kinds of different broadcast vans for CTV and Global and CBC? When's the last time you saw that block of vehicles with their antennas and they're each having their own reporter and crew going out covering the story? I can't remember the last time I saw that. It used to be part of every story, was when you had, let's say, I'm just picking an event, let's say the Twin Towers, okay, or let's say the Air India situation, or some kind of calamity. the media would send their own people and their own equipment out to cover the story, and you got different angles because people see things differently. But now it's photocopy journalism. One person goes out, does a few interviews, uses anonymous sources, and says that bystanders say, but you never know who they are or whether they even were there. This guy's just making it up to fill out the page. Put filler in with the copy, and then everybody else photocopies that, and there's your story. We did an interesting little test. My wife and I a few years ago drove back from Southern Ontario, and as we changed from one zone to another, we would switch to the next FM station or the next AM station, whatever we were near, and listen to the news. And without fail, the news stories were the same from Windsor all the way up to Barry's Bay. They were the same stories. Now, you had the odd little local story, but for the most part, the national stuff was all written by the same, right down to the very words they used. And we looked at each other and said, okay, obviously, somebody is either being really lazy, really cheap, or we're being fed a line. And I think there's a lot of that going on.
Well, I think laziness and cheapness are the driving factors behind it. And the fact that everybody wants to be a journalist, but, this is the laziness part. Everybody wants to be a journalist. Nobody wants to practice journalism, or very few people want to practice journalism. And here's the other part. Everybody that gets into journalism wants to be who was it? The Bernstein and whoever the other fellow was that were on Nixon and the Watergate break-in with the Washington Post. So they all fancy themselves to be, the conscience of the nation, the conscience of the community and society, and they get really much into
the Walter Crank case.
Well, they want so much to editorialize rather than simply report facts. And here's the bottom line. For all of you people out there who want to get into journalism or who consider yourselves journalists, you fancy yourself to be a journalist, okay? If you want to report the facts, you first have to get the facts. And just because somebody from the National Post or the Globe and Mail or the Toronto Star is reporting something as factual doesn't necessarily make it so. They could be just as wrong as the next person. And so what you have to do is you have to be willing to get out there and dig. And if somebody is on a big story with the Toronto Star and you're just a little measly starting up reporter, look for your own stories. Don't just go online, read, it's like cut and paste journalism. Okay? Cut and paste journalism. I just cutting and pasting it from, yeah, and maybe I'll rearrange some of the words to make it look like my own. So,
yeah, they have a name for that in schools called plagiarism. But so in other words, it's hard to get. This is part of the reason why I want a healthy, independent media that has to compete for whether it be online or in print or in audio visual settings, what we used to call TV, these kinds of things. I want them competing with each other for their advertising dollar, for listeners. Like Walter Cronkite was coined as the most respected man in the United States because he would come on, especially during the the Vietnam War era, and tell the American people what was going on. And he tried to keep his bias down to a minimum because we all have biases. It's like when Peter Mansbridge says, I'm not a socialist, I'm a journalist. Yeah, okay, I believe you too. In other words, he was trying to say he had no bias, or what bias he did have he kept in check, which was a load of crap. I would rather have somebody tell me, look, I am a socialist, I represent the NDP, or I believe in the Greens, or I'm a conservative, whatever it is, and tell me what your bias is, so at least I understand the corner from which you're coming. when I was on terrestrial radio, I always did that. I told people, look, I'm a conservative, and I come at life and I come at issues from that point of view. So when you hear me discussing an issue, it's from that particular corner that I'm coming. And there was a lot. I think I would really wish that a lot of other media people would come out and admit their bias, so they're more honest about what they're covering and the angle they're taking, instead of presenting the argument that, okay, here's what happened and this is why it's bad. Well, who are you to tell me that it's bad? You know, a contractor cuts down a tree to put up a condo where people can live. Oh, that terrible contractor, how dare he cut that tree down? Okay, so if he doesn't cut it down, he can't put the condo up and people got no place to live. That's better?
Well,
you know, that's that kind of nonsense.
But the fact that you should be reporting is he cut the tree down. That's the fact.
Yeah. Okay. Let it go at that.
Good or bad is subjective.
If you wanted to mention the tree at all.
Yeah.
Like, who cares? It's a tree. Hand me the chainsaw. I'll cut it down.
Oh, dear, Nick.
I'll turn it into lumber.
Now, Nick, you're really getting us in trouble.
Yeah.
All right.
I am a tree hugger. I just snuggle up to it.
Bottom line.
Cover on a chainsaw.
Bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to say bye-bye to the CBC. But unfortunately, we don't have any political parties, any mainstream political parties that are taking that position right now. So we're just going to have to keep plugging away on that issue for those of you who are political activists. But I think that it's time now. I'm just looking at the clock, and I see we're coming up to the top of the hour. So, Nick, another 2 hours have just flown by at warp speed.
Did they ever?
And, you know, and at warp speed, we didn't even see them flying by. Not that we could see.
That's how fast it was.
Anyway, yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening. We are always happy to have you. Thanks for all of the comments in the chat room. And we will see you again.
I think we set a record tonight.
It could very well be. We'll see you again next week on the Nick and Joe Show on Think Radio, the Think Radio Broadcast Network. And over to you, Nick.
All right, folks, that's it for us. We're done for tonight. We'll see you all again next week. In the meantime, ubiquetal set amor, Deo CBS. Good evening, God bless. Don't let anything disturb your peace, and may you have a fair wind and a following sea.